The Honda H2113 riding lawnmower is one of the best riding lawnmowers ever created. But if you get on the blogs, you're going to find out that a lot of these older mowers have the same problem, and that is that after a few years, the steering starts to get really stiff. Probably the main reason for this is that most of us don't lubricate the front end and the other lubrication points often enough. So what happens is over time that grease starts to harden, gets dirty, and if you've spent any time looking at your lawnmower and fighting that stiff steering, you'll know that it's a sealed front vertical steering arm system, and that there's no way to get inside it to lubricate other than the grease zerk which is there. If you've already tried the grease zerk like I did and you're not having any luck and you've pumped a lot of grease through it and it's still stiff, then you're going to want to watch this video and you're going to want to listen, because I figured out how to get the grease in there broken loose. I'm only doing this is my first video I've ever done. It's the only reason I'm doing it's because nobody else had done it. So again, it's the Honda Harmony 2113 riding lawnmower, and now I'm going to show you a few of the parts that it took to get this done, some of the tools that I used, and I hope it's beneficial to you because I just spent the last 4 hours figuring this out. Here you go. Okay, first of all, you're going to need some kind of a jack to lift the front end of the mower up and get your wheels free from the ground. I have a little small portable floor jack here. That's the one I used. You can use anything that'll help you get it up, including lifting it up. The other thing is you're going to want to get some brake cleaner. I just went over to the auto parts store and bought a can of this, and then you've got to have this little device here which allows you to get your split rings. And then I've got 3 different wrenches. I started with the little 7mm. Not sure that's getting into focus, but there's a 7mm, 13mm, 14mm wrenches, and the other thing you're going to want to have is some penetrating oil. Instead of using just the regular old squirt can of penetrating oil, I went and bought a aerosol can that's pressurized, but you're going to need a good penetrating oil. And then I've got a little 3-pound sledge here that you're going to find comes in real handy as well. So here's the mower. If you're on the right site, this is going to look real familiar to you. When I started this, my wheels were locked in that position and they had frozen up over the winter, and I literally could not turn the steering wheel at all. So if you've got the same situation, or if you're facing a stiff turning, then watch on. Okay, you can see now I've put the jack under the front end of the mower. There is a cross member that goes right below the muffler there, and you'll find a convenient place to jack this up. If you have to get a couple of guys to lift it up and put blocks under it, that's fine too. But just get the front end up off the ground, get it stabilized, because you're going to have plenty of play and movement in this front end eventually. Some of you are probably wondering how effective this remedy was, so I'll take my steering wheel now and start giving you a few turns. That's the sitting on the concrete floor, and sorry for that light. Sitting on the concrete floor right now, I'm taking the steering with one hand and turning it, and then I'll jack it back up here. Now you can see, I'm just going to take this with one hand. You can see how easy these wheels are to move now. I'm just turning that steering arm with one hand, and I'll come back around here with the steering wheel and just take it with one finger, spinning it around very freely with literally one finger. So that's where we're going to get started here, and you can see that it was effective, so here we go. Okay, here's the snap ring tool, and you see that when you compress it, it spreads the snap ring. So just inside the front dust cover, which is right there for the axle on the front wheel, you'll see that there's a little snap ring in there. You'll have to take your paper towel, wipe that off, but basically you're going to remove the wheel using the snap ring tool, just like that. It's going to go in, put those in the little holes, spread it, take your front wheel off. Okay, I'm not going to go through the hassle of taking the front wheel off, but assume that that's off and you've got that done on both sides now. You've got it exposed. You can see right here, I'm going to zoom in on the grease zerk. Well, I guess I can't zoom in. So I'm going to have to hold it closer here. But right there is your grease zerk. I've cleaned it off. And here is the steering arm that you're going to want to take off. The top nut is a 14 millimeter. Right underneath it is a 13 millimeter. So go ahead and drop the arm on both sides. There's the mower left, and there's mower right. And you're going to want to clean that grease zerk off. Of course, both of your wheels are off. You're going to disconnect this arm up here. And then the culprit, what's gone wrong, is down inside this tube right here is where all the solidified grease is. So unfortunately you're going to find that it's welded on the top here and it's welded underneath here, and there's no way to get inside. Once they put that vertical axle or steering arm in place, they weld it on both ends so you can't get in there. So the only thing you can do is continue to try to add more grease, but if the grease ever builds up and gets sticky and thick and solidifies, you're basically out of luck. So what we're going to be doing is, once you get the wheel off, once you get the steering arm up here disconnected, what we're going to do is we're going to start moving this back and forth. As you can see now, it turns very freely. But we're going to try to rotate it on that axle right here, this little pivot arm going up and down. Inside that, that's where the culprit is. And here's the trick. We're going to squirt the brake fluid right up at the top here. If you'll clean that off, and take a small screwdriver and scrape around the top of that where it meets this arm, where it begins the pivoting, and right up in there, I'm going to have you take a screwdriver and get up underneath there. I'm going to jack the mower up here and give you a little better view. Okay, here's the underside of that union I was telling you about, and I'm going to take a screwdriver and I go right along the top here, and you're going to take your screwdriver and you've got to dig out all the dried grease that's right in here, and you should have about a 1/16 of an inch gap once you get all that grease cleared out. This is a really critical step to getting the dissolvent in there. You're going to do the same thing down on the bottom where it meets the bottom here. You're going to take your screwdriver and go around the edge, and you've got to pry all that dried crusty grease out of there. And once you get that opened up, then we can start working on the other thing. The next step is going to be removing that grease zerk. That's where the little 7 millimeter wrench comes in. We're just going to unscrew that, and that gives us a clean access to the little axle there. Okay, take your 7 millimeter wrench, unscrew the grease zerk, put it someplace safe because you are going to need that. Be careful not to lose track of that little guy. Alright, this is where the brake cleaner comes in, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this little tip. You've got to have this type of a tip to get in that little crack I was telling you about. If you've cleaned out the connection there, the union between that shaft and the steering arm, right there, if you've cleaned that out, you're going to have a little gap in there that you can see, and we're going to put this brake cleaner right in there like this, and you've got to go back and forth and start very slowly squirting the brake cleaner in there. And what that's going to do is it's going to break down the dried crusty grease on the top, and then you're going to take your screwdriver and go over it again. And it's really critical that you get a clean space at the top, because your objective is to get the solution from this brake cleaner, to get that to flow down into the axle itself here. Now you've also got your grease zerk removed. Now that's going to leave you a little hole right there. You're going to start squirting some brake cleaner in here. And this brake cleaner is fairly noxious stuff, so you want to be in a well-ventilated area. But spray the brake cleaner at the top, spray it at the bottom, and then you want to start working this arm back and forth, back and forth. Now, my jack is leaking here, so I'll move that up again and illustrate. But as you put that cleaner in to this little spot right here at the top, and you've put the cleaner in here in the zerk, you keep squirting that cleaner in, you're just going to take your wheel and work it back and forth. And the reason that I had you disconnect the steering arm here is because if you're working by yourself, you can't reach up and grab the steering wheel and do this, but you can start working that back and forth. Now, if it's completely frozen up and you have to persuade it, you'll find that these little steering stops are right here. This piece of metal on the bottom that's angled up, that's a steering stop, and you'll find that there's one on the front and one on the back, and that's what keeps it from oversteering right to left. So that's where the little 3-pound sledge comes in, and I did have to use that on mine because it was totally frozen. But I was able to beat on those and break that dried grease loose. But in essence, that's really what you've got to do. The whole game is to get this brake cleaner. And again, you got to start with at least a can of this. I used about 2/3 of a can to do both wheels. Now, what I did as well when I had it jacked up is right underneath here, I put a bucket underneath each wheel, because there's quite a bit of material that's going to drip down. So you'll want to just get a 2.5-gallon bucket, and your wheel is off, of course, and you've got that steering arm assembly sitting there. But put a bucket underneath it, because you're going to be dripping quite a bit of fluid on your, you don't want to get it all over your garage floor. So there you go. All right, the next thing I did is I used this penetrating catalyst, and this PB is great stuff. If you can find this or something like it, it works really, really well. Okay, here's the next step. This is the PB penetrating catalyst, and this is the stuff that you want to spray after you've done the brake cleaner fluid. And again, you're going to rotate that axle back and forth, and you got to be methodical, you got to be patient. You got to keep spraying it at the top and spraying it in the grease zerk, and you're going to get pretty good movement. And then when you start to get all the dark stuff dropping into your bucket, you're going to want to put in this penetrating oil. This is like a liquid wrench, and that's the next step. And again, be patient. Spray this on the top, let it drip down the axle, spray it in the grease zerk hole, and put plenty of it in, let it drip into the bucket. And this is the last step that's going to clean everything out. Okay, this is the axle again. The concept here is to spray your solvent in that little crack at the top between this arm right here and this shaft right here, the vertical shaft. And you'll see now I put the grease zerk back in. After you're done with everything and you've worked that back and forth, you've let the solvent do its job, you've put the penetrating oil in there. The last thing I did was spray it one more time with the brake cleaner, get everything nice and clean, and put the grease zerk back in. Pick your favorite grease with a grease gun and load it up. I ran probably half a tube of grease through each axle just to get everything nice and flushed out, make sure all the solvents, residues out of there, and packed it really well, and the turning is just like new. Hope this has been helpful to you. Okay, one last tip as you are squirting that solvent around the top of that little gap above at the top of the axle. You want to rock it back and forth, and that's why you've got the wheel off and you've got that steering arm disconnected. Just keep working it back and forth, working it back and forth. If it's really stiff, then pound that turning radius stop with your hammer, but just keep working it back and forth, working it back and forth. It may take you a few hours. You're going to have to be patient. Let the solvent do its job. It will break down that dried grease in there, and once it all starts to flush through and you've packed it tight with new grease, you're going to be real happy because your steering is going to be back to normal and you're not going to spend $380 on a new front end. That's just for parts, by the way. So thanks. There you go.